Hi, my name is Michaela Pope, and for my Communication Research and Society project, I would like to talk about Imagined Interactions. I did do a paper on Imagined Interactions in my advanced interpersonal communication class last semester. I focused specifically on Imagined Interactions and relationships and in new relationships. But for the purpose of this project, I would actually like to touch on Imagined Interactions and how they contribute to anxiety and depression in like our world now. And with our world being so advanced and changing daily, a lot of times we hear about anxiety, a lot of the times we hear about depression, and it's becoming apparent in younger and younger generations. Whereas before, you more saw anxiety in like older generations, people that had families and owned houses and had more going on in their life. But it's getting to the point where it's going into younger and younger students, elementary kids. And to me, it's important to take a look at it and acknowledge this because anxiety is a real problem, and without acknowledging it, we're not giving students and we're not giving younger kids the tools necessary to overcome anxiety. So, a little bit of background on Imagined Interactions. Imagined Interactions specifically are cognitive representations of conversational experiences experienced as an internal dialogue. With this, while Imagined Interactions may in themselves not create anxiety, they do contribute to anxiety highly, and I think that's because it is so correlated with anxiety that it's something worth taking a look at to see specifically how imagined interactions can contribute to anxiety. So, for imagined interactions, there are 6 functions that help explain the reason and motivation for their uses. The first being catharsis. Catharsis is the usage of imagined interactions to help reduce tension either within ourselves or a relationship. And the usage of imagined interactions are used to reduce uncertainty within the same aspects. The second function of imagined interaction is compensation, which is exchanging real interactions for imagined interactions. The third function is referred to as conflict linkage, where we use imagined interactions in between arguments, which creates an ongoing conflict within our minds. The fourth function is rehearsal, which is mentally preparing yourself for interactions with another person before the interaction actually occurs. The fifth function is called relational maintenance, which allows us to maintain a relationship by thinking about another person and the imagined interaction. And then last but not least, the sixth function is self-understanding. Self-understanding is the use of imagined interactions to gain a better understanding of either ourselves or of another person's beliefs, values, or attitudes. All 6 of these functions are courtesy of Honeycutt, Vickery, and Hatcher 2015. So, with this information I just gave you, what exactly does it have to do with us as a society? So, according to Medical News Today, the US is above all other regions, including Africa and Europe. And according to Medical News Today, 2/3 were extremely or somewhat anxious about health and safety for themselves and their families, and more than a third are more anxious overall than last year. Not surprising, they also noted that millennials were the most anxious generation, but they did say that increasing feelings of anxiety do not quite relate to a diagnosis of anxiety disorder. One thing I came across when doing a little research within news sources is that an article by US News that says many moms to be are stressed and it might affect the baby's brain. I think this is extremely important to note in the purpose of this presentation because it is relating this theory to society in general, is that so many mothers are stressed and overwhelmed that it's having implications for their baby's brain development while in the womb. And I do believe this is extremely important because now it's not just affecting young adults or even full grown adults, it's affecting these little babies from the moment they're conceived, and it's transferring into lifelong developments. I think this is related to imagined interactions because imagined interactions play a huge role in creating scenarios in our head that might not otherwise be there. So imagined interactions, while they can be a tool to be used for good, they're creating more and more problems and creating issues and problems and different confrontations that might not otherwise be there. Another article I kind of want to pull from was from one that I found from the Huffington Post. It is an article written by a college-age girl who said that she has anxiety and it affects her relationships, romantic and otherwise. She said, "In some ways, I'm actually grateful for it. I believe anxiety helped propel me through school and with great grades, and it's made me ambitious and driven in my career. I think it's also made me a considerate and thoughtful friend." And I can pull this quote specifically where that she said because I personally think that that's why I've propelled myself to achieve as much as I have in school, getting good grades while working full time. And school gives me myself a lot of anxiety that I wouldn't otherwise have, but I use my anxiety to get good grades and get my assignments in on time. And while that doesn't seem like the greatest achievement to some, to me that is something that is hard to get up and do every day when you have this dreading feeling in your mind constantly. So, in conclusion, for the Communication Research and Society project, I did choose to look at imagined interactions and how they affect anxiety, specifically within the US, because that is what most of, or all three of my articles focused on. While it may seem loosely related, I believe there is a correlation between the two through my research previously in other classes and looking at the articles I researched now. Um, Anxiety is a huge problem in the United States and our society in general, and I think it's important that we take a look at that and see that as a current problem. And while I do know some that don't necessarily see anxiety as a problem, maybe just because they don't experience it as badly or they don't experience it at all, I would be curious to know other people's thoughts on imagined interactions and their relationship to anxiety in today's society.